Hi, my name is Diana Schultz, and my presentation will be on Chapter 12, which covers the personality changes in extreme situations. The main topic or question of this chapter is how would people feel, think, and act under these severe circumstances? Stress is dependent on the situation and the individual. Is there any normal or typical way to coping? These situations are very extraordinary and extreme, so there's no normal or correct way to cope and feel during these circumstances. The concentration camp situation. So there was an impact on concentration camps on the inmate's personality. Everybody's personality changed, whether positive or negative. Bruno Bettelheim is a pioneer in the socio-psychological study of concentration camps, and he was a political prisoner and survivor in 1938 by the Nazis in Germany. His article is the Journal of Abnormal and Social Psychology. Two main themes from his article is one of the main purposes of concentration camps was to change the prisoners into useful subjects of the Nazi state by means of exposing them to extreme situations. So, the goal of the captors was both mental and physical change. Number two, under extreme conditions, there was different stages or processes of personality change that was observed among the prisoners. The extreme situations that these prisoners felt were torture, malnutrition, exposure to heat, rain, and freezing temperatures, social isolation, and many other unfortunate extreme situations. Stages of personality change in extreme situations. There are 4 stages of personality changes according to Bettelheim. The first one is the initial shock of unlawful imprisonment. This is psychological shock. This is it's like the very first exposure to the prison. Initial shock is the disbelief of the situation that they're in and the horrors of what they're about to face. Number 2 is emotional detachment caused by torture and human degradation during transportation into camp and first experiences in camp. The captors punish and torture the inmates to break the resistance against them. Number 3 is gradual process of adaptation to the camp situation. This is the regression into infantile behavior. Infantile behavior is the dependency that these inmates face on other inmates' fate or guards. Old prisoners became so adapted to the camp that it was their entire personality. It became like a hierarchy of old prisoners who had been there for longer times to the new prisoners. They became institutionalized and did not know how to return to normal. And this was just to adapt and survive during this process. Number 4 is the final adjustment to the life in the camp. So this includes the acceptance of Nazis' values as their own. Again, number 1 refers to the first psychological shock, and reactions depend on socioeconomic backgrounds. So, higher class may have a higher psychological shock than someone who's been through similar situations. Number 2 includes psychological torture, not just physical torture. Bettelheim reports that he had to detach himself from what was happening as a means of survival. Not just him, other prisoners did this as well. He also practiced apathy as a coping method. Old prisoners became so adapted to the camp in order to survive that it eventually became their personality. This led to the fear of returning to the outer and free world. Again, it was childlike dependency to their environment, also known as infantile behavior. And then there was the acceptance and change in personality, in prisoners' personality. They accepted the values of their perpetrators as their own and identified with them. Old prisoners would eliminate new and unfit prisoners, or known as weaklings, and copied and imitated Gestapo guards, even as far as their goals and values. Again, not everyone experiences the 4 stages in the same way. Some might give up during early stages. For example, those using apathy to survive torture may never mentally return. They become robot-like or zombie-like. And then adaptation and identification to their aggressor can damage the inmate's personality. At first, it starts off as a survival method, but then becomes who they are. Coping strategies in concentration camps. Coping includes internal changes in personality. These are short and long-term consequences, positive and negative effects on personality. Coping has a multiple dimensional coping function. Number 1 is to lessen the immediate impact of stress. Number 2 is to shape ongoing stress experience. And number 3 is to chart the future events and actions. Dimsdale had 10 coping strategies of concentration camp survivors. Number 1 is the differential focus on the good. This is just finding the good in your immediate surroundings. It's just finding any source or little good thing. It's the gratification in bad and ugliest times. So during captivity, some of these prisoners would find little good things that were happening during the day, just to keep going. Number 2 is survival for some purpose. This is a special purpose, a strong reason, or deep meaning for survival. This is just having a family member, a friend, a spouse, or a child who are waiting for you on the outside, and this is how you get by, is thinking about them. Frankel and Wiesel are both survivors, and they refer to this as finding the meaning in suffering or survivor mission. Number 3 is the psychological removal, and this is the attempt to withdraw or insulate oneself from the situation. This also includes the belief in immortality or any religious beliefs. Intellectualization attempts to lessen the subjective emotional suffering by transforming it to an object of scientific study. A survivor said that he would daydream, and also there's time distortion, selective focus on time. So they would focus on all the happy times before being imprisoned. Also, humor is another psychological removal. It is a positive coping strategy, and it is and then there's Muscle Man, but that one is the most fatal, and that's when they become numb to what's happening. They completely detach themselves from the horrors of what they're facing. Number 4 is mastery, and that's environmental and attitudinal. They manipulate or resist the stress system by engaging in physical and mental activities. They are not accepting the aggressor's dehumanizing definition of victims. This includes mental gymnastics, and mental gymnastics is when the individuals would mentally build houses, thinking of times with family and friends, or thinking of activities that they could be doing, and also some said that they would do money management to keep themselves busy and preoccupied off what was happening around them. Number 5 is group affiliation, and these are individuals who are from the same country, region, and former co-workers from political organization work groups. They stuck together through camp. This is a positive coping method because it provides information, advice, and protection. It is said that if you did not find someone to partner up with within the first day or two of imprisonment, that you would not survive. Even being in pairs of 2 was better than none. So it was very important to find one person or a group of people to stick together with throughout this terrible experience. Number 6 is the will to live. It's a basic coping method, but it is a driving force for all survival strategies. Number 7 is mobilization of hope. An example is active hope, which is the belief that camps wouldn't last and it could not go on forever. Passive hope is the belief that where there is life, there's hope. So since you were alive, there was hope that you would survive this. Number 8 is regressive behavior, and that's childlike behavior or infantile behavior and dependency on other inmates or camp guards. An example is that an inmate cried all day and all night, and inmates would go to her aid, but she wouldn't actively do anything to to survive. She would just depend on others to help her. Then there is submission and identification of their aggressor. Dimsdale defines this as anti-coping. Anti-coping is surrender to stress. A quote is, "It is right and the self is wrong." In other words, it is a complete surrender to the stress they are facing. Number 10 is null coping, and this is fatalism. That's like Muscle Man, where it's the complete numbness of your emotions. The inmate does nothing internally or externally to mediate the stress. Instead, they depend on others' fate. Although this is fatalistic, this attitude can be helpful to some inmates. Coping can be grouped into 5 major ideal types. These ideal types include mastery, denial, psychological removal, regression, independency, and identification. Muscle Man coping is the most fatal. It's just the adaptation or acceptance to your surroundings and to the guards around you. The most functional is mastery, which is the will to live, mobilization of hope, struggle for meaning, and purpose of survival. This requires resistance against dehumanization. Internal mastery is the backbone of the coping hierarchical system. The most common form of coping is at the second stage, which is detachment. And then after all this survival in this terrible situation, these survivors would have post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, but the survivors of the Nazi Holocaust, it was known as concentration camp syndrome before it became known as PTSD. The 3 experiences that damage character is moral deformity, bitterness, and disillusionment. The first one, moral deformity, is the sudden release. So after being in captivity for so long, having the hope to be saved, but never actually expecting it, it can be very shocking. The survivor wants to seek revenge in the same way the captors did to them. Number 2, bitterness, is against their own hometown upon return. Because their experience is not recognized, they feel like, why did I have to go through all this? And my neighbors did not. People were insensitive regarding their experience. Some survivors would hear, well, we're all going through something, but they did not go through what these survivors had to go through. Then there is the perception of fate. It's their feeling that their suffering had no limit. It's like they did not know how limitless their suffering was until they experienced it. Those three feelings are a part of PTSD. Some symptoms of PTSD is nightmares, insomnia, anxiety, chronic depression, social isolation, survivor's guilt, and substance abuse. Two sociological facts regarding the concentration camp situation is: one, survival is dependent upon the strength of sense of mastery, which is hope, will to live, faith, and then number two is the study of personality in extreme situations. Has to deal with globally increasing extreme situation of institutionalized oppression, rationalized terrorism, normalized enemy. Going back to PTSD, it applies to concentration camps, POW camps, hostage crises, atomic disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, and more. The studies on PTSD are still in an exploratory stage since they are so situational, dependent upon the individual. Coping patterns are diverse and situational. Thank you for watching. This chapter was very interesting. It's very eye-opening. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.